Hello, everyone. I am Rachel Telfor.
And I'm Michelle Gower.
We are the hosts of a new true crime podcast.
It is called Children of the Void.
The Void refers to children who are missing
and children who have died under mysterious and suspicious circumstances.
Sometimes parents know nothing about what has happened to their child.
And sometimes they seem to know more than they let on.
Like Casey Anthony.
And the John Benet Ramsey case.
We are determined to do our part to find missing children.
And the truth when the story of their disappearance doesn't hold up.
Together, we will blast the shadows with light so that no more children disappear into the void.
Children of the Void debuts in September.
Join us so we can all make a difference.
Please subscribe.
Until then, I'm Rachel Telfor.
And I'm Michelle Gower.
You can catch Children of the Void on Apple, Spotify, YouTube,
and everywhere else you get your podcasts.
Hey y'all, Morgan Rector here. Do you have an idea for a podcast? Furthermore, would you like to host and co-produce your own podcast? I am always looking to expand the portfolio of my company, Leader One Podcast Network. If you would like to have your own show, send me an email and we can talk about it. Aside from politics and religion, I'm open to just about any topic. If you are passionate, knowledgeable, and articulate, I want to talk to you. You can contact me by email, morgansvariety@gmail.com. I hope to hear from you soon. Hey, Morgan Rector here. I'm just dropping a line to say thank you to all of my Patreon donors. Since I'm not a Joe Rogan or Mark Maron, podcasting is more or less a starving artist gig for guys like me. Patreon donations keep me from having to take a job that would take away from my ability to generate more Human Monsters content. The website URL for Patreon is www.patreon, that's spelled patreon.com/leader, O-N-E, Leader One. A way to make a one-time donation is to send it through PayPal at Morgan Rector 331, Rector spelled R-E-C-T-O-R, at hotmail.com, Morgan Rector 331 at hotmail.com. You don't have to give a large amount of money if it isn't possible. If $1 a month or $1 one time is the best you can pony up, it would be gratefully accepted. I know how hard things are for everybody during COVID. Thank you for all the support you have given the show, whether it is through financial donations or simply by listening. I am grateful for all you have given to me and the program. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Human Monsters. The Elan School was an institution selling itself as a reformatory for troubled and wayward youths. Their claim to parents and the state was that in the benign incarceration of a compound set in a rural location with horseback riding and bowling among its many extracurricular activities, their children's behavior would be corrected through various therapeutic methods, with a guarantee that they would emerge as happy, healthy, successful, productive citizens. The truth of Elan was that it was a snake pit where residents were subjected to every kind of abuse, violence, name-calling, public humiliation, slave labor, and worse were utilized as tactics to transform the behavior of Elan's charges. Elan did change its students. Most of them emerged with post-traumatic stress disorder, which often led to criminality, substance abuse, and long-term psychiatric problems. Some committed suicide, while others overdosed on drugs. Since the 2000s, former residents of Elan have been speaking out about their experiences online, and as a consequence, Elan's secrets were exposed. This resulted in a shutdown in 2011. If you wish to learn more about Elan, an excellent documentary made by former Elan alumnus called The Last Stop can be viewed on YouTube. There is also an excellent autobiographical webcomic by a man identifying as Joe Nobody. You can read it at elan.school/tag/comic. In this episode, I speak with Elan survivor Karen Watson, whose disclosures were even more horrifying than I expected. This is that interview. All right, welcome, Karen, to Human Monsters. I'm very grateful for you to do this episode. I've been fascinated by Elan for a long time now. I first found out about it through a documentary, which you've probably seen, called Children of Darkness. For my listeners who are not aware of it, it's a documentary. It came out in the early 80s, and it explored the whole area of children who are mentally ill or have other mental disorders. And Elan was featured in a sequence in the film, and I was fascinated because what stood out to me was that Elan was treating their charges in a very harsh way. It struck me as abusive, with people being screamed at and subjected to really cruel and unusual punishments, like kids being made to live in a dumpster out back, and that's really the least of it. And Karen experienced really Elan at its worst. She was there in its earliest days. She was there in the 1970s. And so, Karen, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what brought you there in the first place? I know that there were kids who were either placed there by the state or by their parents. Which was it for you?
By the time that I got to Elan, I was a ward of the state. I came out of my mother and her husband were extremely abusive alcoholics, and by the time I was 10 or 11, I ran away my first time. In all that time, my mother's husband was having me see psychiatrists from the age of 5, and adults that I would go to tell them what was going on. Of course, they would always promise that they weren't going to call my mom or her husband, but they would. And sure enough, I get home and I got beat even worse. And so I started learning at a young age, just, I don't tell the secrets. I don't tell what was going on. And by the time I was 11 or 12, I just got tired of it and I ran away, went to the police. And understand, back in that era, in that time, the laws were really different. So unless my mother would own up and tell what was going on, the police hands were tied. And so a lot of times my mother's husband would kick me out of the house and tell me, if I thought things were greater on the other side, then, go find it. And then he would call the police later on and tell them I ran away. So after a while, that's what I started doing, was running away. Nobody listened.
Mm-hmm. Was there no intervention by a social worker at all?
No, I had social workers in school, school psychologists, the guidance counselors, the principal of the school. And I was like the odd duck in school. Like, I was the only kid in 80 and 90-degree weather wearing long sleeve turtleneck shirts and stuff like that to cover up all the bruises and everything else that was all over me and stuff. There was times I went to school and I would go to the nurse's office and I would tell her I can't sit down. And I know the teacher is going to make me sit down and I can't. And they would see my backsides and my bottom, but the only thing they would do is the same thing they did all the other times. They talk to the principal, talk to the school psychologist, and then inevitably they would call my mother. She would come down and deny. And it was like nobody listened. And then I was listed as a out of control child. So then, then started the history of being sent to juvenile court. And even there, I would, I'd get there and I'm covered with bruises and cuts and everything else. And mother and her husband would come in their Sunday finest and lie. And I'd beg and beg and beg, don't send me back there. And finally, after 19 times of being in juvenile detention for running away and trying to get somebody to give me help, they finally started sending me to state facilities like Long Lane in Middletown, Connecticut, a mental institution in Middletown, or in Coventry, right over the bridge, couple of group homes. Yeah. And then when they sent me to the YMCA after I ran away from the group home for being sexually abused and beaten up, I wound up getting raped at 14. That's how I lost my virginity and found out I was pregnant when the group home took me back. So then they kicked me out. And I had really nowhere to go after that. And they sent me back to my mother until I had the baby, and her husband put me out on the street. Then my caseworker sent me to a foster home. And then a few months after that is when the state of Connecticut lied and told me I was signing medical papers. They said my son had sickle cell anemia, and it sent me over the edge when I found out that they really had me sign adoption papers, and they took him and adopted him out. So then I had like a mental breakdown. I was put in a hospital, and when I came out and the doctors told my mother what was wrong with me and what I needed, they didn't have medication for, so then they sent me to Elan.
And one thing that struck me as I've seen interviews with the people who ran Elan was no acknowledgement at all that these kids, they're acting out because of abuse, things that have happened to them, trauma. And instead, it seemed to be more about castigating them, condemning them because of their behavior. But it didn't seem like there was much understanding of it, what's behind it, that these behaviors are symptoms, They never seem to look at it that way. And yet they have. Well, and then it makes sense, actually, because, one of the founders, Joseph Ricci, was not someone with a background in mental health care. He was a college dropout and an entrepreneur. He had been a juvenile delinquent, but he didn't understand how to treat these people, and he managed to find a psychiatrist who was willing to go into business with him. And it seemed like maybe he was kind of equally corrupt, like he could make money from it by adding legitimacy in terms of his background, but it seemed like he didn't really understand the whole process of treating these kids any better than Joe Ricci did.
Exactly. And then, he had other people like Jeff Gottlieb, who was another one of his directors he was an ex-junkie. And, he came out of a similar program, and they kind of merged some of what was from that other school and program that he was in. And it was just a mismatch of stuff that just equated to nothing more than torture and and just horrific abuse, both sexual and physical and emotional, you know, the tearing you, the tearing you down, and, telling you how you're a piece of shit. You're not going to ever be anything. And, just on and on. And, I thought the physical and emotional and mental abuse I got when I was at home was pretty horrific, but stuff that was done in Elan just was over the top.
Yeah, I don't see the therapeutic value in personal insults. I mean, how does that help, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at where I'm at today in my life and where I was then, I mean, it's just totally two different ways of going about analyzing and getting to the root of the problem, and then working on repairing and restoring to edify and to help bring value, self-worth, and self-value to yourself, which is something that was not done in Elan at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Oh, yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah. Yeah, there was a girl in the documentary, The Last Stop. She had been sexually abused by her father for years, and eventually they found out about it at her school, and then they started, calling her names, implying that she was responsible for it. And then at Elan, there was like a blackout one day, and she held a boy's hand for like 5 seconds or something, thinking no one would see it, but someone did. So they started calling her a whore and making her dress up like a prostitute and putting on, tons of makeup to make her look cheap. And she was saying, that's the last thing you need after being sexually abused by your own father for years.
Yeah, when I got there, I only was in Elan 1 for a day, and that was for the orientation, get me all checked in, went through the Quell shampooing, all that jazz. And the next day I was transported, and I was brought to Elan 6 first. And while I was sitting at the dining table there in the kitchen area, this young man sat down across from me. Now, I had never seen a kid with eyelashes so long that they were almost touching his eyebrow. And I just looked and I was like, oh my gosh. And all I said to the kid was, wow, you got nice eyelashes. That's it. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't try to come on to him, hey, let's get it on in the bathroom. Nothing like that. Just simply made a compliment. And like 2 weeks later, general meeting, and I got ripped up one side and down the other, called every name in the book. And like you said, all kind of whores, prostitute, cunt, the whole nine, slut. And in the end, I was dressed up in this costume. Janet Ramos had come up with this announcement from one of Queen's songs, and and I'm standing there while, like 60 or 70, 80 kids are screaming and yelling, poking at me, spitting on me. And I'm like, I was just dazed. I had no idea what in the world they were even talking about. I didn't know until like hours and hours later what that was all about. And when the kid came walking in, and then, he jumps in, and I'm like, what? I mean, it just didn't make any sense. You gave somebody a compliment and they turn it into, the worst thing ever, the most horrific, defilement. I mean, everything about you that you have left at this point, your self-esteem, your self-worth, your self-value, self-respect is just at that moment is just totally shredded to pieces. I mean, you might as well just rape me and have me stand there completely naked. I mean, that's, and I was 15 at the time, so I didn't have a clue, not a clue. I knew one thing though, this was not going to be very nice.
No. And yeah, it's weird because it sounds like you just couldn't win there. Like there's somebody said, say you just decide, well, I'm going to be like a really good person here. I'm going to be polite and nice and, not never be a problem. But then you'd be persecuted for being a goody two shoes. So it's like, they didn't even tell you like what you could do to please them so you could make the abuse stop. It was just there was no standard that they could hold up, right? Where they could just say, well, things will get better for you if you do this or that.
Yeah, we had this kid in my house. His name was Eddie. And he looked like Howdy Doody, right? He had the reddish curly hair, the freckles. He was real skinny. And yeah, he was like that. And they labeled him exactly that, being a Howdy Doody goody two shoes. And so that's what they dressed him up as. He had bozo shoes on, and he was dressed in this Mr. Poindexter outfit, and he had the most ridiculous announcement. It just didn't make any sense. I mean, the kid wasn't bothering anybody. He stayed to himself, minded his own business, tried to just keep his head down and keep it moving, but you're right. It didn't matter whether you did something outstanding for the good or did something outstanding for the bad. They found a way to just tear you apart.
And so did you ever adjust to life in Elan? Is there a way to survive it at all, or?
Morgan, I think that question is on an individual basis. Some of us are stronger than others. I think that things that one endures from childhood throughout their life, there's a mechanism inside of us where we are able to escape somehow, turn it off when the acts are taking place, and then come back to reality when everything is done. And the endurance of it all. I had seen a lot. I had been through quite a bit by the time I got to Elan, and I understood enough that I wasn't going to let anybody beat on me anymore, whether it be physical, emotional, or mental. So like when they would have general meetings and they expect you to get up and go after people and humiliate them and do all that stuff. And after a few general meetings, I just would sit there and look at people like they're stupid. And I just wouldn't participate. When they put me in the boxing ring, I don't even know if they knew that I knew quite a few of those kids that were in there, because we all had been in Long Lane together at some point in time. I was in Long Lane like 3 different times. And there was this one girl there. We didn't get along in Long Lane, and we kind of, you just knew that tension was there. And when they put me in the ring, we're talking about the boxing ring, that was my opportunity to let that rage and anger and frustration, the hurt, the pain, and all of the junk that had been done to me. And I wasn't about ready to let that girl put one glove on me. And I wore her out all over that floor. And since she was the biggest girl in the house, Jeff Gottlieb didn't have anybody else. And so that was the end of that. I never was put in a boxing ring after that. And And I never participated in the general meetings as far as getting up and spitting at people and poking them and, you know, hollering in their eardrums as loud as I possibly could and, you know, push them in the walls and all that. So I didn't do any of that. Like I said, after the first few general meetings, I would just sit. I wouldn't even participate in it. I just watched the lunacy.
Oh, lunacy is correct. What the strangest rule that I ever heard about was that you were not allowed to smile. Did they ever explain what that was about?
Oh yeah, you were supposed to be having, you couldn't even look at somebody. They called it acting off your eyes, and you were flirting. You were being a slut if you smiled especially if you smiled at somebody of the opposite sex. And if they caught you smiling or looking at somebody that was the same sex, then you were, you know, degraded as, you know, homosexual or a lesbian and all this other stuff. And it could just simply be that you were just in a happy mood, or somebody said something that was funny and you got caught chuckling. It just, yeah, you weren't allowed to. Basically, you're supposed to keep your eyes to the ground and keep it moving.
God, I mean, and also as far as physical abuse goes, I know that another thing they did was this paddling where somebody who had transgressed would be put over, I don't know, somebody's knee maybe, or maybe they had to kneel over a table. I don't know how they did it, but people would line up and paddle them, and so many of them would do it for so long that they would leave bruises on them, leave scabs on them. Like, did you experience that or witness it?
Yeah, I experienced it, and when I saw that clip in the video in the movie, I was like, man, that is such a lie. That is such a lie that it was only used, you know, for that particular purpose. That was a lie. We were coming back from lunch from Elan 6. Now, my house was 2A in Waterford, and we had to go to Elan 6 up the road for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, as we were coming back, it was kind of windy. My hair was long then, and a bee got caught in my hair near my ear. Now, I am highly allergic to bee stings, and they knew that when I got there. So this bee stung me, and I'm screaming as I'm swatting my face, trying to get the bee from my hair. And I'm like, you know, yelling, get it out of my hair, help, help. I'm allergic, I'm allergic. By the time we got to my house, they had about 5 or 6 people brought into the room, had the chair, the metal chair. They had me go knock on the door. Meanwhile, my face is all swollen. You couldn't even see my ear now. I'm having difficulty breathing, and they do a haircut on me. So I got 5 or 6 different people starting to yell at me. Yeah, you know, you're out there making a jerk of yourself, blah, 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 blah. And then they throw me over the chair. 2 people hold me down, one by my neck and my hands, and the other one by my feet. They had a rounded out paddle with holes drilled through it, and they began beating me on my backside and beating me, and they just kept taking turns. And this went on till I almost turned purple. And when they realized, because I wasn't giving them any noise, I wasn't going to scream and yell and all that when they were smacking me. And I couldn't breathe anyway. So I guess when they saw me starting to change color, they realized something was wrong. And they brought me up to 6. And the nurse, Miss Nina, she gave me an epi and dosed me up real good with Benadryl. But yeah, my backsides from my lower back to the back of my thighs was so black and blue. Yeah, just reminded me when my mother's husband would beat me with the 1x4.
Yeah, Yeah, Joseph Ricci tried to downplay the paddling by saying that they used a ping pong paddle and that, yeah, he tried to make it sound much more benign than that, but
Yeah, no, this the one we had in my house looked like someone cut an oar off, cut
wow.
the cut the handle of an oar almost completely off. So there was only about a 6-inch handle on it. And then there was a bunch of big holes about the size of nickels and quarters drilled through that thing in several different areas. And that's what they used on us in my house. And I
So,
wasn't the only one.
so was anybody punished rather for suffering from health problems? If someone got the flu, were they punished for complaining about feeling nauseous or something like that?
Um, I remember Vincent Edwards getting punished. He was, but he got punished all the time. I mean, if he just breathed somebody else's air, they used him for the punching bag. Um, but I do remember he got really ill, and about the only thing they would ever do is bring us over to Six, and sometimes they didn't even bring you up there to the nurse. They would just go upstairs in the office and get a couple of Tylenol or something and give it to you. But you weren't allowed to, oh my God, you've got you got the flu, you got 103 fever, you're vomiting, you got diarrhea. You didn't get brought to the hospital. We never got brought to the hospital. Well, except for when they almost killed Lewis. That one they did bring him to the hospital. But then they brought him right back and brought him up to Six for a double two house general meeting, and re-beat him up all over again, and broke his other arm and stuff. So, but yeah, we never got brought to a doctor to be seen for anything medical: eyes, ears, nose, glasses, teeth. We never got any of that in 2A ever. And we never ever had nurses and doctors that came to the house. Because listen, if outside nurses and doctors came to the house and saw us in the condition that a lot of us were in, I pray to God that something would have been done then in 1975, 76, and 77, not wait till 2011 and shut them down.
Yeah.
They kept outsiders at bay as much and as best as they could.
Yeah, they censored like all the outgoing mail and your phone calls were monitored, right? It was
Yep, yep. I made one phone call in the 2 years I was there, and it's when I finally got a straight A report card. And the coordinator was standing up there, Pilar was up there, and the director, Janet Ramos, was sitting right there. And I got to talk for all of about 2 to 3 minutes. Talked to my mother real quick, and then when she gave the phone to her husband, and I wanted to kind of rub it in and tell him, I got straight A's, but I got them when I wanted to get them, not when you tried to make me, or something to that effect. Anyways, he was like, "Yeah, I already know. They told us a couple weeks ago," and then he hung the phone up. That was the end of that conversation. But yeah, they monitored everything. They monitored your mail, your phone calls, what came in, what went out, and a lot of times we never even got our mail. Like they had I vaguely remember the night that the last night I was there, the next day when they told me that I was to pack up, I was leaving. That's when they gave me a stack of mail, and there was, I don't know, maybe half a dozen or so letters and cards that I never got. They held my mail for 2 years. I never got them.
Any explanation for that?
No.
Oh yeah, because happiness just wasn't allowed at Elan, right? That's
Yeah.
pretty much, yeah.
Two of them were birthday cards from my grandpa, and which he actually did get to come up and visit me. And then one letter was from my baby sister, and then I think there was another card and letter from my my nana, and that was it. That was all I had there in that stack, was like 5 or 6 pieces of mail that was a year or two old. We weren't allowed to have stuff like that. That's why when I see stuff about, going to the lake and going to movies and decorating the inside of their house and having a Christmas tree, and we didn't have any of that. Our facility stayed locked. Our windows were locked. Doors were always monitored. People were at every single door. The one little staircase we had, in between levels, we didn't have television. We didn't have a clock. We didn't have a calendar. We didn't have a lot of the things that I've heard some of the other houses like 3 and 8 and stuff like that had. We didn't get that. We didn't get trips into town, on a semi-regular basis. I remember being brought into town one time, and that was when Parsonsfield caught on fire, and they mustered a bunch of us up. And at that time, I was an expediter, and a bunch of us got in the van, and we went to Parsonsfield, and I was like, I was thankful I was in 2A,
Yeah.
because what I saw there, I was like, how are you going to get these kids out of the room? Their doors are all locked, and nobody was going back in there. And I was like, they're going to burn and die. You can't leave these children in the room. And yeah. And then Jeff Gottlieb and some people from 3 and stuff, and Elan 1 came up, and by then the fire was put out, and then they started extracting the other kids out of the locked rooms and stuff. So yeah, we've had people in 2A, they jumped out of the second floor door that didn't have any stairs or anything to get down. They
God.
just jumped and started running. One girl, we never heard anything more, and then we heard like a day or two later that a young girl's body was found, and we had a general meeting because they found Timothy and brought him back, and they ordered us that we weren't allowed to say Chrissy's name, and we didn't know nothing from nothing. And I thought, well, yeah, it's not looking good for Timothy, but my God, I felt so bad for that girl, because, the rumor was Maynards have the right to shoot if you go on their property. And at that time, they hated us. They had no idea what was going on in there to us kids. None whatsoever. And I'll tell you something else that's false. Okay? The age limit that the documentary claimed based off of what Joe Ritchie and everybody was saying, that wasn't true. I had people in my house as well as in 6 that were in their 20s and 30s.
30.
Yes. There was one lady, she was a teacher. She was a school teacher. She said she signed up to come to Elan to get mentally well.
Wow, that's a joke. Well, I get yeah. Well, they did sell it that way though, didn't they? They actually they presented it in very benign terms. One woman in that documentary said that she got the impression like, oh, there's horseback riding. It's like a Club Med for disturbed teens, and then of course you go there, it's a snake pit, right? So
Yeah, yeah. She thought she could leave, like it
uh,
was, yeah, like it was some resort therapeutic place. You sign in for 30 days and then you could leave.
like the
And
Betty Ford Clinic or something.
yeah. And she was like in her 30s. And then Calvin Morton, he was well into his 30s, early 40s. He was in my house. So, some of that stuff that I heard, watched in the documentary, I was like, that's a lie. I'd say about a quarter of the people throughout all the houses was 25 and older, a quarter, 25 and older, and they were mixed in houses with teenage kids that was anywhere from the age of 12 and 13 on up.
Yeah, I know some of them had the choice between going to jail or going to Elan, like the court would send them there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like back to Joseph Ricci for a second. It's he kind of ran it like, there were allegations that he was mixed up with the mafia, and he certainly ran it like the way the mafia runs their operations, secretive, don't tell the outside world anything, um, threaten and blackmail people who might divulge certain information to the outside world that could be damaging. So he did seem to have brought that standard there. And I found in the footage from Children of Darkness, that interview, he struck me as kind of malevolent at times. Did you ever interact with him at all?
No, there was twice that I interacted with him. Day one, when I was brought there off his plane, and um, the second time is when I got let out. They make you sign contracts with your prospective parents or whoever it is you're going to be released to and go home. Okay, there's a
Mm.
contract that both parties have to come to an agreement. There's certain things that party A wants, and there's certain things that party B wants, and you got to come to an agreement before you can get released. So then you sign this contract. And so within a week of me being at the house, apparently there's problems. And next thing I know, my mother's on the phone and has Joe Ritchie on the phone. And so I'm on one phone downstairs, she's on the other upstairs. And now she's told Joe Ritchie her rendition of things. And so I'm on the phone and I said, this is what was agreed upon in the contract. This is what her and her husband said they were going to do. And if they don't do these things, then I don't have to do my things. And so that's where we're at, because her husband just shot at me 3 nights ago and almost killed me and my friend. And so I was like, yeah, no, I wasn't going to come back to the house. Are you kidding me? And so in the end of it, after Joe Ritchie listened to my mother and then listened to me, he explained to my mother what the program was about, what it, supposedly was there to teach, and, that they violated the contract, and therefore the contract was null and void, and that he was not going to bring me back in. But she was trying to get me put back in that place. And she had no idea until many years later, just before she died, did she have any idea what had been going on in there. And, she told me if she had known what was really going on in there, she would have done everything she could have done to get me out of there. And, you know, unfortunately, when you go in as a ward of the state, your parents basically have just signed you over to the state, and whatever they feel like doing with you, that's it. Your parents can't help you. When they had the chance to help, they did nothing. And so when the state takes over and they mess it up even worse, you're basically at the mercy of God, basically, you know.
Or the devil.
Or the devil, yeah. In this case, in Elan, that's what that was.
One thing that occurred during your time there, and this is a pretty significant historical event in terms of the history of Elan, is Michael Skakel, who was a relative of the Kennedys, somehow related to them. It came to light that he committed a murder, and then he disclosed his culpability at Elan because he was a resident there. Were you there at the time that happened?
Yes, but he was in Poland Springs. He
Oh,
was in, I think he was in House 3 or House 1 at the time. He was in Poland Springs, so he was at one of the other facilities. I was out in Waterford, Maine. But word got to us, because I think that happened in 70. I think the murder happened like in 76 or 75, and he was there, I don't know, like 78, 79, maybe, something like that.
wow. And, you know, I've often thought I would have left that place in a straitjacket. And one reason why I think that way is because, like, my weakest subject in school was math. And one thing I found out about it is that if you were weak in a subject in the school part,
the dunce caps.
The dunce caps. Was there more to it than that? Would they call you stupid or anything like that?
Oh, you had a general meeting. You had a general meeting. So there was this kid, me and Michael Burke and Eddie were like in competition. And in the beginning, like, I had bad grades. And so I wore this dunce cap. But I didn't really have bad grades. I just didn't have the motivation to let anybody see my intelligence. So we had this teacher, her name was Miss Schott. And man, she had a way of just motivating you without her even doing much of anything to do it. It was just her finesse and her way of teaching. And so we had a general meeting. It was report card time. And Michael Burke and I were the last two. Well, actually, they called Eddie. Eddie got a couple of A's and he got B's, so he was safe. Michael Burke was always the bookworm. They called him Mr. Poindexter because he was just so arrogant with his intelligence. And he didn't let anybody deflate that in him. So report cards came out. Him and I were called up, and I just knew I was going to have to wear another 6-foot tall dunce cap. And instead, I got straight A's, and Michael got all A's and 1 B. They had a general meeting. Michael Burke was put in that big dunce cap with a big sign about being stupid and this, that, the other thing. Little did I know that by getting that straight A report card, they now expected me to keep straight A's. And then when the next report card came out and I got a B, I was right back in a dunce cap. General meeting and got a dunce cap. And I thought, yeah, that ain't right. But, you know, I got my first straight A report card in my whole life, and I was good with that. So if I got a B, so be it, you know.
It sounds like self-esteem itself was taboo at Elan. What was your self-concept like when you were released? How did you feel about yourself after all those experiences?
I was scared to death because we were denied socialization. So, like, I had to relearn how to be out in public. I had to reacclimate all over again. It's like somebody that's, been seriously injured and they're having to learn to walk and talk and eat and everything else all over again like they were a baby. And I was scared to death. I was absolutely scared to death. I was scared of noises. I was afraid of people. I was paranoid. Um, but at the same time, freedom had never felt any better. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to worry about having cold water doused on me early in the morning. When they wake you up, I didn't have to worry about being put in a boxing ring. I didn't have to worry about being made to dig in that 20-foot hole that they had us digging with teaspoons. I
Oh yeah,
wasn't a,
that story. Yeah, that was an interesting story. Yeah.
I mean, all those different horrific things, but now on top of it, how do I sleep at night? You know, um, and the dreams, the nightmares, the terrors, the sweats all night, constantly waking up. And, I just wanted to die. I mean, it was hell. I wanted to die. And up until that point, I had never drank. I never, unless my mother gave me some of her Schlitz beer, like I wasn't one of these kids at 11, 12, 13. I was out on the streets all night, getting into drugs and alcohol. And that wasn't me because I was being sent away in state facilities. So, my whole teenage years were totally taken away from me. So when I finally started smoking pot and drinking, it was to help quiet those voices in my head of those 80 and 100 kids screaming and yelling and shouting and cussing at me, and just all that lunacy that was going on in there. I needed something to quiet everything down and give me some sense of I can just go, oh, kind of thing. And so that's when I actually started drinking and getting into drugs and stuff, you know.
And one thing I heard, another punishment I heard about that I struck me as particularly draconian is that you might have to take a toothbrush and like clean a floor tile for hours, or do the same thing with a toilet for like 8 hours straight. Did you ever have to do that stuff?
So yeah, in our house we had a little kitchen area that we never used. There was never any food in the house. Okay. We didn't have any furniture hardly. There was metal chairs, a bunch of fold up metal chairs, and there was um, one table that I remember. And then in the communications office, there was, a table and a couple of chairs and stuff. But my house was very scant with furniture. But the shot downs would be on their hands and knees, and we would be delegated a square, like a 5 by 5 area. And we had to just be on our hands and knees and just scrub that area. And you couldn't deviate and go any further than where you were designated to be. And you might see two shot downs just standing at these windows. Now in 2A, our windows were almost sealing the floor. and you had to go as high up as you could reach. And if you couldn't reach all the way up, you had to get a chair. And you were given a towel and a toothbrush. And that's all you did all day, was those sets of windows and the floor. And if you weren't doing it right, of course, you got screamed at nonstop all day. Well, then, like I said, Vincent Edwards was the smallest one in the house. And, he was cool as anything. He was a goofball. And no matter what they did to him, no matter how abusive they were, see, his thing was he just was starving for attention and some affection. And if the only way he could get it was by getting his lights punched out in the boxing ring, or getting a general meeting and being thrown up in front of all these people, and, tossing him in the dumpster and forgetting about him for 15 hours, whatever. In his mind, he had been so abused and so institutionalized that he equated that as, you cared about him and stuff. It was just horrible. But yeah, he was one of the ones that was really used up a lot. And you didn't get pads on your knees so that you didn't, your knees didn't swell up and get, be all stiff and sore. You weren't given those kind of luxuries. And
what about the dumpster story? He was put into a dumpster once, right?
Oh, he was put into it all the time. There was a big, huge dumpster at Elan 6. And it was on the side of the house. And they would purposely start filling it with garbage. So this is how this is all methodical. It's all thought out and planned. It's strategic. So they would throw garbage in there and let, it get all hot and stinky, and the food would spoil, and you got flies and bugs and maggots. And then in the morning when we go up, they turn around and here's little Vincent Edwards, throw him in the dumpster, hand him a container, an old cottage cheese container with some water and a toothbrush. And they would tell him he couldn't come out till that dumpster was immaculate. And they'd shut the lid on him. It's 90 degrees outside, and you're shutting the lid on this kid that's not going to be able to breathe. And the dumpster is probably reaching as high as 100 to 110 degrees in there, and you're telling him he can't come out. Sometimes they forgot about him.
God, that's just plain criminal,
Yeah. And then if they got tired of that, then they would get him out, and he'd come join the shot downs in the back of Elan 6, where there was a pit that they had us digging with teaspoons. And by the time I left in 1979, that pit was an easy at least 12 to 20 feet wide and as deep as 12 feet deep. And at nighttime, at dinner time, somebody would come out with the water hose and start spraying the water in there to start attracting the mosquitoes, while we were in there digging with teaspoons.
God, I mean, the Holocaust almost seems more humane than this. God. And how about, you were one of the human lawnmowers too, right? So what did that entail?
Okay, so to the back side of Elan 6, back where the barn is, there's a field. And at one time they were talking about it was a baseball field. And so these weeds, at that time I was at least 5'5", and these weeds were up to my shoulders. this grass was up to my waist easily. And the shot downs were ordered to, after breakfast, to go in that field and squat. You weren't allowed to let your butt touch the back of your shoes or the back of your heels. You had to squat and literally start pulling the weeds from the ground. And I mean, as fast as you could. Of course, you were going to get what they call stand right there and give you these little mini haircuts. And then you have to drop right back down and pick up where you left off. And, you know, blisters, they didn't want to hear anything about you need a Band-Aid, because in a couple of minutes your fingers were going to get raw and bloody and the Band-Aid was going to come off anyway, so you weren't getting a Band-Aid. And we weren't allowed to stop until that entire field was mowed by hand. And sunburn, you have blisters, your skin and stuff would be bubbled up. Didn't matter, you know, didn't matter.
God.
No.
There are people living in maximum security prisons who have better lives than what you experienced in Elan.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, like I said, some of those houses, Morgan, some of those houses, I've heard other kids talk about they got to watch television. Like, we didn't have that. We didn't have anything. It was four walls with some windows and metal chairs. That's what we had. We went to breakfast, lunch, and dinner at Elan 6. The only time we ever watched a television or anything like that is if one of the teachers brought in a video or a movie of some sort that we had to do some type of a school project with it. Kind of like when the movie Roots came out, and, you know, your teachers would tell you, okay, you know, episode 1, episode 2, when this certain night of the week at this certain time is when this show is coming on. You need to sit and watch it, and then this is what you need to, you know, you need to write an essay about it, kind of thing. And so that's similar to what the two teachers that we had that would come in. Other than that, we didn't get to watch TV. And we didn't go to the movies in town. So, you know, the people that got to experience those luxuries, you know, I'm grateful that they did, because we didn't. And I don't know rightly that 6 did either. I know I remember seeing a TV in their living room, but I never saw anybody sitting and watching it. So
yeah. Were you allowed to read books that were not for school, like a novel or something?
no, not in my house.
So what were the differences between the different houses? Was it a matter of some kids being considered more of a problem than others, so they were put in one house, or was it based on their history coming there before enrollment? What was the reasoning behind putting a kid in one house and then another kid in another house?
Money.
Oh, really? Oh,
Money. The kids that were private got the better houses. State kids like myself were in the state houses.
yeah. I think at one point the parents who were paying, I think it cost them like $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I think that was around the time you were in there. I mean, adjusted for inflation, that's like they must have been making millions off this place.
Oh, easily. And another thing that I saw in the documentary, somewhere in the documentary, it was stated that there was like 150 kids, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In 1977, when I got there, there was Elan 1, there was Elan 3, there was Elan 6, Elan 2A, and Parsonsfield, Elan 4. So 5 and 8 and 7 hadn't gotten there yet. So there's already 5 houses. Parsonsfield easily had like what, 60 to 100 kids in there. And then my house, we had, I think it was 28 women and 42 men. And then Alon 6 was almost double the size of my house. So you put those numbers together right there and you have well over 200 plus kids. Now you do the other houses that's still sitting in Poland Springs. He was up to about 400 to 500 kids in between 77 and 79. He easily had about 500-600 kids. He didn't have no 150. He may have had 150 in one house, but not between all of the facilities that was there when I was there.
And I imagine it must have had dorm style sleeping arrangements. So did you, I guess it's probably a stupid question to ask you if you had your own room. Was it more like you shared a room with other girls? Is that how it went?
Yeah, like our dorm was like our dorm was like a Connex box. Like two box cars on a train put together.
Hmm.
And we had bunk beds, and they were, let's see, there was 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bunk beds in one room.
8? Wow.
Yeah, 8 bunk beds, 3 on each side of the wall, and then one in the middle at the head and one at the middle in the foot. And you had like a little gangplank area that you could walk, get off your bunk or whatever to walk around to go into the bathroom. There was one bathroom with one sink, one toilet, one shower. Then there was the front door, and then there was a little off section that you probably could equate to like a real swanky walk-in closet that had 3 more bunk beds in there.
Wow.
So there was 8 in one room and 3 in the other. And then the night person that was supposed to be night watch, they sat in a chair. They didn't get to sleep in a bed or anything. They were supposed to stay awake all night.
Was it possible to make friends at all, or was it such a paranoid atmosphere that you probably just couldn't trust anybody not to divulge any of your secret feelings or whatever?
I think that people that ran away with each other had friendships and felt they could trust one another to run away with from there. And like Timothy and Gloria, they ran away together. They both got caught, brought back. Then Timothy ran away with that girl, Christy, who they found her body shot somewhere down the road somewhere. But they brought Timothy back. Lewis, I think, I want to say he tried to run away with Eddie first. And see, I was told while we were going there, my caseworker told me, you will never be able to run away from this place.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of looked at her and she said, because the only way you can get there is by plane. And that's the only way you're getting out of there. So, of course, when we got on Joe Ritchie's plane, you know, that pretty well cemented that statement in my theory, in my, you know, in my understanding of it. So I didn't really get, why were these kids trying to run away if the only way out of here is by plane? And it never dawned on me that that was just a hoax. But you know, I mean, I tried to be friendly with some people, not overly friendly, like I don't know how to explain it. Kind of like in a Secret Code, you know, on the DL, you know, kind of thing.
Were you forbidden from expressing feelings of sympathy or empathy toward others? Like if someone was receiving a particularly harsh punishment, you probably couldn't comfort them, right?
No, no, not in my house. No, you'd have a general meeting for that. And then you'd get your lights punched out for being a wuss. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you couldn't do that. Like I said, I just, after the first few general meetings of, you know, getting up and yelling at somebody, and I thought, why am I doing this? Because I don't like it when they do it to me. And I'm thinking, you know, and I'm being fake at that. So if they want me to be honest, well, then I'm going to be honest. And that means I'm not participating in that lunacy. And, but I didn't want to show any that I had compassion either. So I just figured just sit there with my arms crossed and just look straight ahead, you
Yeah,
know.
but in the footage from the haircut in Children of Darkness, you can tell that when these kids are screaming at the people who were being punished, that it was contrived, that it didn't seem like it was their nature to scream that loud at someone because they left a streak on a window while cleaning it or something. That I mean, that must be strange, and they do it for a long time, right? You have to scream like 20 minutes or something.
Oh God, you scream until you don't have any voice left. You know, when I saw the documentary and I was watching Alice Dunn, and I thought, you know, so this, you know, this documentary was done at least 10 years after I left, and nothing about her had changed. She was the same when I was there as she was the same in that video. She's so fake and she's so manipulative. And I watched how she walked around as, you know, a general meeting was their version of a general meeting. And let me tell you, that was really watered down, because kids will get up out of the chair like they're popping out of a Jack in the Box, you know, putting on that show, and chairs flying, and, you know, they're making a mad dash for the person. They're not strutting up all, you know, melancholy, like, you know, they're really charging at you. And, you know, when I saw the documentary and I saw how Alice was like trying to egg them on without trying to come across like she was egging them on, you know, she was like, does anybody else feel that way, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden you saw people getting up, and I was like, oh, here it goes, you know. Yeah, there's a lot of kids that probably felt similar to how I felt. but they were just too afraid not to do it. To not go against what was being programmed for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing it. And, when it came to the general meetings, like I said, after the first few, that wasn't my schlick, and I was not going to partake in it. I just didn't. But yeah, I saw people that, spoke out about, especially like with Vincent Edwards. You couldn't help but love Vincent and feel bad for the stuff that they would do to him, and lock him up in rooms and keep him there for hours and days at a time. Nobody is going to, when you put somebody in a closet the size of a 3x3 with no light, no nothing, and lock him in a closet and think that keeping him there for days on end, that he's not going to come out and be like a raging animal. I mean, you're insane. You got a real problem. You are twisted totally the wrong way, and to do that repetitively, like I said, I was there for 2 years. I can't tell you how many times they did that kind of nonsense to that poor kid, and anybody in their right mind would come out of there, after being put through that several times in a month. You're probably going to come out and you've lost a few marbles,
Yeah. Did you ever see someone just basically become destroyed by it all, have a nervous breakdown, or start swinging at people like they just lost it? They just couldn't take it anymore. The abuse just broke them down.
Yeah, Gloria Johnson. And even after they gave her a general meeting, she just stood there. I don't know where she got it from, but she got something and she just went to cut her wrists open. Right there. Just, yeah.
And I suppose she got a general meeting for that too, did she?
Afterwards, yeah, they stopped the general meeting. She went up to Elan 6. They wrapped her arms and brought her back down. She was fighting the whole way. They drug her in by her hair and her arm, and then 2 people held her up, and everybody went charging at her again. Yep. The blood was still all over the floor and everything else. You weren't even allowed to clean that up. Just leave it there. Yep. And I couldn't be a part of that. That didn't make any sense to me. I mean, blood was coming through the wraps that they had on her arm, and I'm like, she's going to bleed out if you guys don't get her to the hospital. Like, this is not, rocket science here, people. She's trying to kill herself here, and no.
And strangely, they tried to counteract it all with these group therapy sessions where people are doing the primal scream to get in touch with certain feelings, and sometimes they cry and they get a hug, but then any other time they're being physically, emotionally abused. So, I mean, was that kind of offsetting, to get compassion here and then cruelty here?
No, it was a manipulation. It was methodically planned. Those groups were for a purpose. And the purpose was, it took me a while, but I caught on. I figured it out. And then I didn't put my name in the box anymore. So especially when you did the primal group, okay? The primal group, you write down, a feeling or emotion that you're, something you're dealing with or whatever. And so the person running the group starts digging in and starts asking some pretty personal questions. Now you're sitting in a group with, half a dozen, at least a half a dozen to a dozen more people, depending on how big the group is. And this is with men and women. So if I got issues about being molested and raped, I don't think I'm going to feel comfortable having guys in that group. But that's what would happen. And then when they hit a nerve with you, that's what they would have you start to scream about, right? And so as you're saying whatever it is they're instructing you to say, and at my house it was like, okay, if I want you to say this, and if that's not what you're feeling, then say what you're feeling. Now the moment you do that, now they got dirt on you. They know a weakness in you. They know something that wasn't in the file about you, and they use it against you. Now, when you have another general meeting, now you're going to be claimed to be something totally different than what they've been claiming all along, you know? And it was just, so then I just, once I was like, wait a minute, this, this is sick, you know? And I'm not going to lie, a couple of the primal groups that I was involved in, it actually helped me. It allowed me to release stuff that I had been carrying around from childhood, and everything towards my mother's husband or friends of theirs that had molested me, why my mother allowed this stuff to be done to me, that sort of thing. But some of the stuff that, some of the people revealed, it was used as a weapon somewhere down the road. And the encounter groups, those were just full of rage. I mean, people literally would just, their chairs and everything would come up right with them from where they're holding the chair so tight, yelling and screaming at the person that's sitting across from them, that, you start to wonder if they're going to start having a chair fight. Some of them could be pretty intense.
Oh, no doubt. And did you ever have to do that thing where you got to like wear a sign that spells out your emotional problems and walk around that way all day?
No, we didn't have nothing therapeutic like that. Our signs were stuff about being babies, whores, prostitutes, sluts, an emotional leech. Jackie Sims was given a sign claiming she was an emotional leech. She was outspoken. She didn't bite her tongue. And but she knew how to work people to get stuff and to get her way, or try to get her way, even with staff and directors. And they labeled her as an emotional leech. And so yeah, it was stuff like that. I saw the sign in the documentary and I thought, man, I would have been more proud to wear a sign like that than the getup that they would have me wear, the signs I would wear.
Well, I mean, I saw one of these signs. This girl, this was in the Children of Darkness, and it said, began with, "I'm an emotional cripple." And I'm thinking, if they have these problems, they should receive some intensive one-on-one therapy, not where they're being screamed at, but by an actual therapist, a qualified therapist. But that was never made available to anybody, was it?
No, you didn't have no licensed therapist come in and have sessions with you. No.
Oh, it's ludicrous. Yeah, speaking of therapy, so I was wondering, have you healed from these experiences from Elan? And if so, what has helped you to achieve that, to be able to live a more normal life without the PTSD, if that is what you developed?
Well, at some point in my life, um, going to different doctors and trying to find out, why I was experiencing the stuff I was experiencing. I was diagnosed early with being, at that time, they called it manic depressive. And I was a suicidal manic depressive. And I suffered with insomnia. And so they had me on medications for that. And then they later found out that they thought I was having mini strokes, when in actuality, my panic and anxiety attacks that I started having shortly after coming out of there was panic and anxiety attacks, not mini strokes. So they put me on medications for that. And then, of course, I was drinking, and then I became labeled with borderline schizophrenia. So then they put me on different medications for that. And so by that time, I was on about 12 or 14 medications, uppers, downers, benzos, barbiturates, and so I was like a walking zombie. And then when the doctors started pill mills were getting hit left and right, doctors were getting arrested and everything like that. So doctors started taking a different tone, a different look at things. And then they recognized that I was coming in and I was in withdrawals. I wasn't, just shivering because it was cold in there, but I was going through withdrawals from where I was using more of my medication than I was supposed to, because I had gotten so immune to it. And so they decided to start dropping me. So, of course, then I, was using street drugs. And thank God I never, became a junkie or anything like that. But, and then in 08, after being in and out of jail for almost 2 years, I lost my business, my home, my car, my children to alcohol, prescription drugs, and street drugs. And I took up residency at a dumpster in a milk crate. And finally, one day, I just came to the realization that I was done. And I walked into the rooms of AA. And with the help of AA and the members in AA, I got to learn so much, and I have so much free therapy that I understand what I have, where before I didn't know what it was. I couldn't stand to be in my own skin. And at one point in time, I killed myself. I was dead for over 10 minutes, died twice. And that's how bad it was. I wanted to die. I couldn't, I didn't want to go on anymore. The anger, the hurt, the pain, I had so much baggage I was carrying all the way from childhood, and all of the junk, just the junk. And then, I come into recovery, and I learned how to, I put it all out there, everything from as far back as I could remember. I shared it, with this one person, and I praise God that he put that lady in my life. She's been in my life ever since. And, it took a lot for me to trust that somebody I could tell all this stuff to that was not going to repeat it to anyone else.
Mhm.
And she hasn't. She's never divulged any of the most darkest and intimate stuff. And I'll tell you what, until you do that, I can't even put into words what happens to your whole body, the change. You feel like the anvil's just falling right off of you. Your chest opens up where you can freely breathe, and feelings and emotions start coming all through. And you know what? I'm not afraid of them today like I was when I came out of Elan. I was I was so afraid to let anybody see a tear come out of my eye, or anger or frustration or disappointment, or happiness. Or I was in such fear. I was shackled with such fear. And yet inside, I was starving and fighting to want to let it out. So it was this constant battle, which gave the symptoms of, everything they were diagnosing me with. And then, of course, it affected my health. It affected my mental health as well. And so, here I am today. I'm now 10 years free of any medications whatsoever. I don't think I sound schizophrenic. I haven't had a panic and anxiety attack in over 12 years. I can go to sleep now, and I will always be scarred, but I am a survivor, Morgan. I have never claimed to be a victim. I am a survivor, and what I learned in these past 13 years is that I'm only accountable and responsible once I started making my own decisions, and I started acting on those. So from the time that I got out of Elan until today, that's the part of my life I'm responsible for,
Yeah.
because I made those choices and decisions. Nobody else made me drink the alcohol. Nobody else made me, do the drugs, smoke the weed or whatever. Those were choices I made. And so that's what I'm accountable for that part of my life up until now. It is what it is. I've made a lot of mistakes, but you know what? I'm going to always have PTSD. I'm going to always be traumatized over what I experienced. And I'll tell you, I've learned that what happened to me in Elan magnified by 100 times worse than what I suffered all through my childhood out here. And the healing that I've gotten, I went back in May. I went up to Maine in May, and I went back to where my house used to be, and I got to meet the people that bought that property, and I got to meet the man that has the property where Lawn 6 used to sit, and the barn is still there. That barn is over 100 years old, and it's still there. He's now turning it into like a 3-bedroom vacation spot for him and his family. And beautiful. Guy does all the woodwork himself. It's absolutely spectacular in there. He's still working on it when I went up. And the uh the Tillies that owned the property where my house was at, she was so nice and allowed me to go down the property and everything like that. And what an experience I felt. Again, I felt like an anvil was taken off of me. And the area where the house used to be, there is absolutely nothing growing there. Nothing.
Mm.
There is growth all around where that house stood, But where that house was built, there's absolutely nothing growing there. It's just hollow. And the house has been torn down now for over 15 years. And that kind of told me something, you know, that um, there's a lot of ugliness there in that spot. And I don't think anything's going to be able to grow there anytime soon.
No. Maybe the human lawnmower stripped it of too much vital vegetation or something. You know?
There's nothing there.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
I took a video. I did a whole video and stuff, and you know, there was less grass than if you had your lawnmower guy come and mow your lawn, freshly mow your lawn. I mean, there was nothing there. And the lady said that house had been torn down about 15 years or so ago. And I thought, man, you know, but it was healing. It was very healing. And I needed to do that. I needed to go up there. And a part of it was to practice forgiveness, you know.
Yeah.
There's a piece in the Bible where it, you know, there's a passage that says, forgive them for they know not what they do. And if I want to heal, I had to find a way to be able to begin the process to forgive.
Yeah.
And I'm not ever going to forget. I'm always going to be scarred on the inside, you know. And I still have trust issues, and I'm very leery of people. I've become an observer, you know. Your words say one thing, but I'm going to watch your actions. And
well, yeah, considering at Elan, everywhere you go, someone's standing there with a clipboard writing down every move you make. I mean, that would make you pretty paranoid.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you didn't have paranoia issues when you got there, you sure did have them when you left. That's a given. And I will argue that with anybody that's ever been in Elan that tries to say they don't have paranoia issues. That's not true, because those expediters were relentless. They were relentless. They would write stuff down even if you didn't do it, because it was so boring and nobody was doing anything that they had to find something. You know, you bent down to tie your shoelace, you know, looked like you were getting ready to run away. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so you didn't dare want to move too fast, or, you know, oh my God, if somebody left a pencil, you know, oh, you got a weapon, you know, it's a pencil. I was picking it up where somebody left it. Oh, you got a weapon, you know, especially if you're a shot down. You're not supposed to have anything. Not supposed to have shoelaces, not supposed to. You're lucky that you even had your shoes. And you weren't allowed to have anything. Nothing. You're lucky, you know, they let you keep your belt. And you know, because you know, I don't know, they just made you afraid of everything. If you looked the wrong way, if you were you know, you were always being accused of doing something even when you didn't do it, you know.
And was some of the last stop rather, was some of that movie just propaganda? Because like there was a woman wearing a green shirt who really portrayed it as being this very positive environment, all these people who graduated, and she was really putting a sheen on the whole thing, and it just seemed like is she really it seemed like she was maybe using a lot of euphemisms or trying to gloss over it all.
Yeah, but as I understood it, wasn't she one of the offenders?
I think so. I think she went from being a resident to getting a job and being one of the therapists. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was inflicting the mental abuse, from what I understood, worse than some of the others. Like, isn't she that lady that got that antique shop or something?
I'm
Because
not sure.
I looked for it when I was up there. I sure did. I sure did. I was trying to find that that historic antique shop that that she was standing in front of in the video thing. Um, but um, yeah, listen, there was parts of the video that um were glossed over, and my personal opinion on that is people people already are having a hard enough time wrapping their brains around what they know so far.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then another lie that Elon told was, "Oh, our graduates they all going to go to college and work and meanwhile, people are suffering the same effects as you." Like the girl in the documentary said, she started doing heroin because of her experiences at Elan, self-medicating, and she was an
Yeah,
addict for like 10 years or something.
a lot of now I found that some of those kids did go on to college, but those were the wealthy kids,
Yeah.
and those were the kids that lived in the better houses in Poland Springs. That wasn't any of the kids that I know of from 6 and 2A. I do know that quite a few of the kids from the two houses, 6 and 2A, they committed suicide. They committed suicide within 1 to 3 years of getting out of there. And and then you had a lot of them that turned to junkies, OD'd numerous times. Um, a few of them have went on to try to, put the pieces, what little bit they had, to try to make some kind of life for themselves, whether it be, becoming a musician, an artist. I know the one young lady, I was talking to her for a while, that did I want to say her name was Patty. She did the art depicting the abuse that took place in Elan. And that was her therapy. That
Yeah.
is her therapy, to get it all out. And at the same time, to get other people to know what these kind of places can do and will do to your children when you put them in places like this. You know, it is not, beautiful lakes, horseback riding, bowling once a week, squash and all this other junk. No, it isn't that at all. It's brainwashing. It's very methodical. It's very systematically planned out, and it is executed with great horror. And the more they can inflict pain on you, the more they were getting off on it. And that's scary.
And did you ever discuss the truth of Elan with your mother? Like, did you ever talk to her about what actually happened there? And if you did, what was her reaction?
She didn't believe me.
Really? Oh, wow.
She didn't believe me until just before she died, when she had her last heart attack, and we were talking, you know, and she apologized, and I told her she didn't have to worry about that. It's all good, but yeah, she didn't believe me when I came home and told her. And especially when I found out she was on the phone with Joe Ritchie a week after I got out of there. And I, then I really let into her, because I thought, here I trusted you. I'm telling you, just some stuff. I didn't get into the real gory stuff. Um, and I was like, why do you want to try to put me back in there? Like, I just didn't get the whole thing. you know, um, it wasn't until I got in recovery that it all finally came to light. Abuse is a cycle.
Yeah.
If your parents were raised in nothing but abuse, that to them is normal. That to them is love. And so they're going to do the same thing. And until that cycle is broken, it's going to continue. And so, that's what it was in Elan. These guys all got together, a bunch of sickos that had their own demons, and thought it would be a great thing to, start this program and get paid to act out their sick fetishes and fantasies and stuff like that. And that's what they did. And they got millions.
Oh, yeah.
Millions.
Total abuse of power, no question about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And how could the state walk in and see what they saw and find nothing wrong with it?
Well,
Well,
they made the mistake of notifying them before they got there that they were going to inspect the place, and then that gave them time to cover up, right? So.
well, that's because they were in Joe Ritchie's pocket.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Gotta remember, he was getting ready to run for office. So, he's got certain people in his pocket. And, hey, what is it to make a phone call and, give them a heads up about something? But when I think it was New York or something came, they didn't give him no heads up. They just showed up.
Yep, yep. And I think
And
they may have seen the boxing ring. I think they saw the worst of it too.
I wouldn't doubt it. I'm glad they did. I'm I'm
Yeah.
I'm really glad they did. I'm surprised they didn't go to Parsonsfield.
Yeah, well, ultimately, I mean, the internet brought about its demise because suddenly parents could do research on the place. And then what they found out was that, there's a history of abuse and people being damaged by it. And thank God for that. But it's just too bad it took until 2011, but better late than never.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you got the sexual abuse that was running rampant in there. And
Really,
then,
sexual abuse, that I didn't know about.
oh yeah. Yeah, there was matter of fact, um Diane and trying to think of the other girl's name. They which was another thing that I found odd. Like, I didn't ever remember people being transferred from one house to another. Like, that was really uncommon. But Diane, I remembered her from when I was in Elan 1 the first day I got there, because she wore these big glasses like Granny off of Tweety Bird and Sylvester. And she had that poochy face like Tweety Bird. And so when she showed up at our house, and I was like, okay. And then, you know, she was talking about some of the sexual things that was going on with I want to say his name was Pete something or other. Anyways, another staff member that was sexually abusing some of the girls that were you know, they weren't wrapped too tight. And so because she was a private, they put her over in our house. But she didn't stay long, and she didn't like our house at all. So Jeff Gottlieb moved her back out to Poland Springs. But yeah, and then of course I heard about you know, the stuff that was going on out in Parsonsfield with couple of the staff members. Alice Dunn was aware of a lot of it because she was really good friends with I want to say that guy's name was McCann. I think that's what his name was, something McCann, I think. And I don't know of it happening in my house because we had Janet Ramos was our assistant director, and Jeff Gottlieb was her boss. And the only time we ever really saw Jeff Gottlieb is when we knew a general meeting was about to happen. So, you know, but I mean, there was sexual activity in the house amongst the, you know, amongst the kids. You know, don't ask me how they were able to sneak into the dorms with each other. Again, that has to do with building that kind of friendship where you trust that it's not a setup.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, they got caught, or the night person that they thought they could trust wound up ratting them out because somebody else saw it that wasn't part of the clique of friends and stuff like that. But you had to be really, 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 really super careful about that, and real slick. But yeah, I mean, it was well known, some of the staff that was doing, you know, especially in Parsonsfield, because, you know, let's face it, the kids that were up there in Parsonsfield, they were whacked out, you know, and you're talking murderers, arsonists. I mean, they were really damaged, and then, you know, they're being medicated. Now, here's the other thing. Once you get to Elan, any medications you were on stops. You don't get medicated no more. So if you've been on, you know, psychotropic drugs to keep you from, you know, literally killing people, you know, or just being halfway in your mind to some capacity, you need those drugs. And, you know, we're talking about drugs that were being given in the 70s. Okay, we're not talking about the kind of stuff you get now. We're talking Melaril, Thorazine, Stelazine, you know, Dilaudid, Demerol, you know, Valiums, all that kind of stuff. And these kids were getting it like a bag of Skittles, man. And then to come into Elan and you get nothing. Nothing. Now you're locking these kids up in a building, and you think that that's not going to be insanity 1,000 times worse? Come on.
That's almost malpractice, really. I mean, if it's adjudged that a kid has a chemical imbalance or some kind of structural abnormality in their brain, and the medication keeps them from lashing out at people, it's
Yep.
almost more or less a legal requirement that they have to take these medications. So,
Remember, Joe Ritchie did his research, him
yeah,
and Dr. Stevenson, and that's why they targeted Maine, because they didn't have all those restrictions and all this stuff like a lot of the other states did. And, we're talking Maine, we're talking, hundreds of thousands of just nothing but wide open wilderness. And I'm telling you, this was all a methodical and well thought out where they were going to put things, and way far away from civilization. It was nowhere near built up like it is now. And that's something else people need to understand. When you're talking in the 70s, when it first opened, it literally did not have big, beautiful houses right down the street and, the grocery store and all that other stuff. It was all raw forestry for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. There was no houses and big, horse farms and like it is today. Like when I went up there in May, I couldn't believe all the houses that were adorned on both sides of the road. And I was like, man, when I was here, this was nothing but a gravel road, and it was just forest. And I didn't dare ever think about trying to run out of there that night because it was pitch black. And so yeah, it's really changed. It's really changed. And stuff that they did in the 70s, I heard that there was kids talking about when they were there in the late 90s, none of that stuff was going on. They were like, oh, we didn't know about that. And and I don't know if they ever did start allowing kids to start taking their medications again or not. But when I was there, was nobody coming down every 6 or 8 hours and handing out your medication. We weren't going up to Elan 6 at breakfast and dinner and getting medication served to us. Didn't happen. You didn't get medication. You just dealt with it.
yeah,
So
right.
try to imagine if your whole life had been on medications that help keep you alive and help keep you stable, and now all of a sudden it's not even wean you off, it's stop you dead cold.
Yeah, and your moods are swinging all over the place, and you're not allowed to exhibit any feelings like that, even though you're experiencing intense depression or anxiety or
Yeah.
mania or anger, and you
Mhm.
just got to suck it up, right? Yeah.
It's like having a room full of hostile autistic kids.
God.
It
Well,
was insane.
oh, no doubt. Well, I'm glad you managed to find some peace and happiness in your life. Took a little too long, and you've been through a lot. I hope most Elan survivors have managed to heal from it to as much as you have. Um, but unfortunately, there were casualties along the way. But
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for doing the interview. I really appreciate it. That information needs to get out there. No question about it.
Yeah, if it sounds too good, it probably is.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that you know about the only thing that I could say.
Yeah.
The only thing I could say to any parents that are currently having problems with their kids is, number one, um, you might want to look at what part you play in all that. Number two, um, before you go sending your kid to some far off place, do some serious researching on it first.
Oh,
And, go out and make an unannounced visit and see for yourself. Because a lot of times, if it sounds too good, most likely it is. And,
yeah.
you got to ask yourself, how much, how precious is this, is your child to you, that you would want to subject them to those kind of horrors. And, just one quick note to you. There was a school for boys here in Florida that just coincidentally happened to be shut down in 2011, right when Elan got shut down,
Mm.
for similar and even worse practices than what Elan was doing.
Was that
And
the place where the boys were made to shave their heads?
yeah,
Yeah, because they
yeah,
put that in the documentary, right? They showed another school like that. Yeah.
yes, they made them wear underwear. That's all they got to wear was underwear, and their food was rationed to them. And I did some research on that school, and oh my gosh, I was like, yeah, well, if those were the only two choices in the world, I'd probably want to just shoot myself in the head and get it over with. Because
Oh yeah.
you know, we never had per se, like understand, there were children that died in there.
Yeah.
Understand, there were children that were murdered in there. And a lot of it came from the beatings that were sustained, the lack of nutrition, um, the lack of proper medical treatment. Couple of suicides were in there. And then, like I said, we've got several kids just from my house alone that to this day, nobody knows where those kids are, you know? And there's rumors that there's a grave, like a cemetery or something. I don't know anything about a cemetery, but I have heard that supposedly there's a cemetery. Now, common sense would tell me that if you even have one plot up there on that property anywhere that has to do with the death of a child, somebody from the state needs to be doing some serious investigating. But at this boys' place here in Florida, they actually have a whole cemetery back here with hundreds of children that were killed in there
Jesus
from,
Christ.
yeah, from the practices. And understand, back in those days, that was called discipline. It
Yep.
was, yeah, it wasn't called abuse. Oh, they're just mad because they were being disciplined. Thank God we have come out of the Stone Ages, And I think this is great work, what you guys are doing. And, thank you for reaching out and asking me to, share some of my experience. And, hopefully it will help others.
And one last thing, I meant to ask you about this earlier. In One Last Stop, they mentioned something about this stuff called electric sauce, where they would mix up like discarded food and cigarette butts and they dump it over someone's head. Do you remember that going on?
No, not at my two houses,
Mm.
because they probably would have made Vincent Edwards the scapegoat for that.
Oh, God. Poor guy.
Yeah, I remember, that's the other thing. Like, I was reaching out to another mutual friend of yours and mine, and I gave a list of names. I have really been trying to search and find, these kids, and see if they're dead or alive or anything like that. But like I said, we were kept segregated. So a lot of what took place in even at Elan 6, we didn't know. We didn't know nothing about it. Or maybe there was a few, such as like the coordinators, because they would all have a meeting together and stuff like that. It wasn't until I became a coordinator that I became pervy to a lot of this stuff. That's why I'm able to tell you some of the stuff they did was methodical. It was already planned. They already knew who was going to be subjected to what and when, and everything like that. And it was done systematically. And I tell you, the morning that they called me up to the office, and I thought for sure I was getting shot down, and they were going to call a general meeting and this, that, the other thing. And when they told me to pack up my things, that I was leaving, they didn't have to say anything more. I was gone.
Oh, yeah. No surprise there. Yeah.
I was gone.
Well, thank you so much, Karen, for sharing all this. And I hope it's cathartic for other people who've had the experience as well. And best of luck for your future.
Yeah, I hope to talk to you some more.
All right. Take care, Karen. Have yourself a good night.
All right. Thank you.
Later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.